Okay, so LTRO is a big word in Europe especially. So everybody just, so it's long-term refinancing operations. And essentially what it is a way for the ECB to monetize. And if you read my latest blog posting, it's very clear that the ECB has been incredibly aggressive in monetizing. They've been criticized for not monetizing, and that's an extraordinary criticism in my opinion, because right now their balance sheet to the Eurozone GDP is larger than the Fed's was at the worst spot in the financial crisis in the US, and it's going to get bigger. So basically the last round of this LTRO, so basically what happens? A bank can go essentially to the ECB and borrow money at 1% for 3 years. And in the initial announcement, they even downgraded the collateral that could be received. So essentially what you can do is buy or borrow at 1%, and then you could immediately invest in some of these risky sovereigns and get who knows what interest rate. So let's say in a safer sovereign, you could get 6% over 3 years. So it's so-called carry trade. So you make the spread, and it's kind of exactly what the ECB wants, given the ECB can't buy these sovereigns directly. But what they can do is to lend you the money and then you buy the sovereign. So it's very indirect, and I think the whole strategy, I'm surprised the Germans didn't jump all over it, because it just really seems like backdoor, propping up these regimes that have been offside for quite a while. So the last round was about 500 billion euros. And one thing that's kind of interesting with this LTRO, the size of the LTRO is unlimited. There's no limit on it. So the big question is, February 29th, how much is going to be borrowed? And I guess the other question, what is it going to be used for? So the original one, it's kind of hard to see exactly where it's going. And some people documented that some of the banks, they borrowed the money from the ECB, but then parked it back with the ECB at 25 basis points. So it's a so-called reverse carry trade. So, and effectively, why are they doing this? They're doing this to reduce their risk. So the banks that are at great risk, that have got way too much leverage, way too much sovereign exposure, they take that money, just put it right back to the ECB. But there's other reports where some banks are actually participating in some of this more risky debt. Now, yesterday, as you know, ECB met, and there was a number of announcements that are quite, to me, confusing. And basically what's happened is, one key thing is the collateral that you use. And in the last round, there was considerable discussion about relaxing the standards of collateral. So these banks can only get the ECB LTRO if they post adequate collateral. So some of the language that the head of the ECB used was, to me, pretty confusing. In that Draghi said that there was about $600 billion of things that could be used as collateral. But after the mandatory haircuts, that came to about 200 billion euros. Okay, well, just doing the math there, so you get the idea. You put $100 or 100 euros of collateral up, they're not going to give you 100% on that. So they're not going to lend you 100 euros. But effectively, the ratio that he mentioned was, we'll lend you 33. Okay, this is a little different than kind of what people expected. And the way that it works is pretty complicated. And I've looked at the collateral sheets for a number of countries. And basically what happens is the collateral assets are put into different bins depending upon how risky they actually are. And the bins are determined by the PD, which is the probability of default. And usually you'd be taking stuff that is 0.1 probability in a year, in any, like over the next year of a default, or maybe push it to 0.5, but this schedule goes all the way to 1.5% probability of default over 1 year. And the haircuts are exactly like that. So depending upon the maturity of the bond that you're giving, so that depends, the haircut increases with the longer term maturity. So the sort of haircuts that are used are what you should expect, basically what he's saying, which is 66%. That indicates to me that it's not going to be a feeding frenzy on the 29th. That the amount that will actually go out, and some people are talking about €1 trillion, which would explode the balance sheet of the ECB. And if that got worked into loans and things like that, it could be a different story. But I tend to think that given these collateral rules that, and again, it's very complicated because these collateral rules are established by the national central banks in each country. And only 7 national central banks have actually posted the rules that basically accepted these collateral rules. And even then, the NCB's rules need to be approved by the Governing Council of the ECB. And the group of countries that are basically going to be using this, this lower quality collateral are kind of the countries that you would expect to be there. Ireland, Spain, Portugal. Some other countries like Austria are in there, Cyprus, France, and Greece isn't there. They don't have any collateral. So it's just no way. So all the other countries are on the other side. Deutsche Bank said that they would not use the LTRO. That they said that it was a sign of weakness. So, but just overall, does it make sense to you for these banks to go out, borrow money from the ECB, and then invest that money in risky sovereign debt? Does that sound like a long-term solution? So you increase your leverage and you use the increased leverage to buy sovereigns? And yeah, it could actually decrease the sovereign yields temporarily, but only temporarily. In a situation where they're already very levered, I guess the only reason to do it is if you can make the money on the carry trade. Because the money that you make there, you could use to increase your capital. But that carry trade is not a riskless trade, obviously. You borrow money to invest in risky sovereign debt. So I guess my thinking right now, initially I thought that it was going to be a feeding frenzy, that they could go to 1.5 trillion euros at the LTRO. But given these new collateral standards, I think that we'll probably see something of the same order of the previous one, about 500 billion euros. And again, that might moderate some sovereign yields for a while, but doesn't solve the big problem.